In 1513, a disgraced former diplomat sat in exile on a small farm outside Florence, broke, humiliated, and desperate to get back into politics. So he wrote a job application. It just happened to become the most infamous book about power ever written. Machiavelli wasn't a philosopher in an ivory tower. For over a decade, he'd been a senior official in the Florentine Republic, negotiating with kings, watching armies move, studying how popes and princes actually operated behind closed doors. Then, the Medici family returned to power, the Republic collapsed, and Machiavelli was arrested, tortured, and thrown out of public life. He wrote The Prince partly to win his way back in. He dedicated it to the young Medici ruler as a kind of resume. But what he produced was something stranger and more lasting, a manual for political power stripped of comforting illusions. Here's what made the book dangerous. Before Machiavelli, most writing about leadership described an ideal ruler, wise, virtuous, godly, the kind of prince who exists in sermons, not in reality. Machiavelli threw that out. He said he wanted to write about the effectual truth of things, the world as it actually works, not as we wish it worked. And the world as he saw it is not run by saints. It's run by people who must sometimes lie, break promises, or act ruthlessly. Because the ones who don't, who insist on pure virtue, tend to get destroyed by the ones who don't share their scruples. That single move, separating political effectiveness from conventional morality, is the earthquake at the center of this book. Everything else is aftershocks. Machiavelli built his whole framework around two forces in constant tension. Fortuna, fortune, chance, the unpredictable current of events. And virtu, not virtue in the moral sense, but something closer to skill, adaptability, the will to act decisively. He compared fortune to a violent river that floods the plains, unstoppable when it rises, but manageable if you've built the right defenses before the flood comes. A skilled prince, in his view, doesn't wait passively for luck. He prepares, adapts, and strikes at the right moment, because Machiavelli believed fortune controls maybe half of what happens to us. The other half, we still control. This is the line everyone remembers, usually out of context. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But Machiavelli's actual point is more careful than the meme version. Love, he says, is fragile. It depends on other people's goodwill, and people are fickle. Fear is something the prince controls directly. So if you can only reliably hold on to one, hold on to fear. But, and this matters, he immediately adds a limit. A prince should be feared, but never hated. Hatred gets rulers overthrown. The line between fear and hatred, in his telling, comes down to one thing. Don't seize what belongs to your people, especially their property. Rule with a firm hand, but don't be a monster for no reason. To hold power, Machiavelli says a prince needs to combine two natures, the lion for raw force and the fox for cunning. The lion can't see traps. The fox can't fight off wolves. You need both. Machiavelli's most quietly radical idea might be this. A prince doesn't actually need to be virtuous. He needs to appear virtuous, merciful, honest, religious, faithful to his word. Because most people judge by appearances and outcomes, not by what's really going on behind the scenes. Everyone sees what you seem to be. Few experience what you truly are. That doesn't mean lie constantly for no reason. It means keep your word when it costs you nothing, and be ready to break it the moment survival requires it. Because your rivals will do the same, and only one of you can afford to be naive. For centuries, Machiavellian became shorthand for pure cynicism and cruelty. But a lot of historians read The Prince differently now, not as a celebration of tyranny, but as one of the first honest descriptions of how power actually gets won and kept. Written by a man who'd spent his whole life watching it happen up close. Whether you find that clarifying or chilling probably depends on where you're standing. But nearly everyone who's studied power since, in politics and business and strategy, has had to reckon with the questions Machiavelli forced into the open. What do people actually respond to? What does it cost to be good in a world that isn't? Machiavelli never claimed people should be good or evil. He just refused to look away from what actually keeps someone in power. 500 years later, we're still arguing about whether he was a cynic, or just the first person honest enough to say the quiet part out loud. If you want the next video breaking down another book that quietly rewired how we think, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.